At Lowe's, get up to 35% off select major appliances. Plus, members get free delivery, install, and more when you spend $2,500 on select major appliances. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 2/25 while supplies last. Selection varies by location. Excludes Massachusetts, Maryland, Wisconsin, New Jersey, Florida. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Visit Lowe's.com/terms for details. Subject to change.
Visit your nearby Lowe's on East 17th Avenue in Hutchinson.
What? No normal intro. Welcome back to the Primal Potential Podcast. I am Elizabeth Benton. This is not our normal intro because this is not our normal podcast episode. We are in a 10-episode series called The Consistency Vault, because this is a great time of year to talk about one of the biggest flaws that we make when pursuing our goals. We focus so much on the habits we want to acquire and build, the things we want to do more of or stop doing, but we struggle with consistency because we've never pursued consistency as a skill set. Instead, we're just relying on self-discipline, motivation, willpower, all of which are great things. But of course, they lack the staying power of consistency. And so we feel like we do well for a little bit, and then we don't do well for a little bit, and we're trying to find our footing and make our way back. And it's a series of always striving and never really arriving. We can end that if we intentionally build this skill of consistency, which is what we're talking about in this Consistency Vault series. If you're enjoying this, I would love it if you would take a second to make sure you're subscribed to the show, turn on notifications, leave a rating and review. Guys, it really makes a big difference, and it would mean the world to me if you would take 15 seconds out of your day to do that. And of course, share this series with somebody. I think it would be extra powerful, even more helpful to listen to these episodes, to take action on these episodes with a friend or a loved one. So have them start at episode 1 of The Vault. Let's get into today's topic. Let me ask you a question. Think about an area of your life where you struggle the most. Maybe it's time management, maybe it's nutrition, maybe it's fitness, or task management. With that area in mind, an area where you struggle to follow through, where you feel like you're either on or you're off, do you have in that area a framework for flourishing? I would imagine most of you are like, no, I'm winging it. Now, I don't mean a to-do list, and I don't mean a goal. I mean a structure that supports your follow-through. For that area where you are struggling, do you have any kind of structure in place that supports you? Because most of the time, when we feel stuck in this cycle of like, hey, when I'm good, but when I'm bad, all bets are off. It's because you do not have a framework that supports you, a framework for flourishing. And I want to share where I got that phrase. It might seem like an odd phrase, a framework for flourishing. I got that phrase from gardening. That's what a trellis does. Now, I am an aspiring gardener. I'm terrible at it. I know very little, but I'm learning and I'm making mistakes. And one of the things that was very obvious right out of the gate is if I try to grow pole beans or a tomato without a trellis, they're going to collapse under their own weight really, really fast. They're going to get messy. They're going to get heavy. They're going to fall apart. They need a support structure in order to grow. So do we. There's just too much happening in our lives, too much at play, too many different variables that will collapse under the weight of everything else if we don't have some type of framework, some type of structure that supports us. Now, a lot of people push back on this idea of structure because they're like, I can't because my schedule is just too variable and there's just too many moving pieces. And so you're thinking of a rigid, inflexible routine, and that's not what I'm talking about. Now, other people push back because they're like, I just don't like to feel restricted. I don't like the idea of rules. I have this inner rebel that just pushes back anytime I set rules for myself. And I think that's a big part of the problem, the assumption that it's a restriction. A trellis doesn't hold the plant back. It holds it up, right? The trellis doesn't restrict the plant's growth. It enables it. It is a framework that allows it to flourish. And that's what so many of us are missing, not only in our practice, but in our minds. We're winging it and we're bouncing between effort and exhaustion, intention and avoidance, and everything feels really hard. So this framework is not rules and restrictions. It's scaffolding. When people hear words like rules, standards, boundaries, a lot of times they just go into turtle mode, cover up like, it's too restrictive. What if I don't want to follow that? What if it doesn't work for this? I don't want to feel like I'm boxed in. But I really do believe that's the flaw in your perspective. So I've talked about this before, but it's worth mentioning again. The Latin root of the word rule is regula, and it means a support or a guide, a trellis. So when we have rules or standards, frameworks in our lives, it is a support or a guide, a trellis, not a limitation, but a scaffolding for our own growth. Not something that holds us down, but something that holds us up. Structure does that in our lives. It doesn't remove freedom, it creates it. Because if everything is an option all the time, we will crumble under the weight of that. There will be endless decision fatigue. I'm going to use the example of my business right now. If I wake up every day as a business owner and every task is an option, I am overwhelmed before I've even opened my laptop, right? I have just the anticipation of decision fatigue if every day I'm trying to figure out, what should I do today? What should I tackle today? What should I work on today? So I have a framework that Mondays are for these type of tasks, and Tuesdays are for these types of tasks, and Wednesdays are for these types of tasks. And yes, sometimes things have to move around a little bit. Like next weekend, we're going on a family ski trip. So things will have to shift a little bit, but 90% of the time, maybe even 95% of the time, that structure gives me freedom. It's not like, oh man, I want to be able to do what I want to do on a Monday. No, this frees me up from the weight of decision fatigue and frustration and overwhelm. It doesn't hold me down. It supports me. It removes friction. It makes consistency easier. It makes follow through more likely. So let's go back to the question. In an area where you struggle, do you have a structure in place that supports your success? Let's take nutrition as an example. It's a big one for a lot of people. One of my very simple structures is I don't have starch or sugar for breakfast. That's not a punishment. It just removes morning friction. My kids right now, I make bread for them, and if it starts to get a little stale, I'll do a baked overnight French toast where we have tons of eggs from our chickens. So I'll just cut up the bread in little pieces, cover it with whisked up eggs and a little bit of milk and cream and vanilla extract, bake it. They love it. It's easy. Eliminates me having to cook anything for them in the morning because it just cook it the night before. And I'm not having to debate in the morning like, oh, should I have some of that? Or if we go out to breakfast, I'm not saying, oh, those special pancakes look really good, because I've removed that friction. Now, if I want the French toast, I can have it for dinner. I can have pancakes for dinner next Tuesday if I want to. But I'm making my mornings easier where I know I'm going to have Greek yogurt or I'm going to have eggs. Those are my breakfast decisions. And another small piece of my structure for support and nutrition, lunch is dinner leftovers. Now, are there situations where maybe I have lunch with a friend? Yeah. But that's the exception, not the rule. And so when I'm home, or even we've got a house in the mountains, we're taking our kids skiing next week, like I said, even there, lunch will be dinner leftovers. I'll make sure that whatever we have for dinner, we cook enough that there's leftovers for the next day. So I don't have to be wrestling every single day of my life like, oh, what do I want to have for breakfast today? What do I want to have for lunch today? I'm not scrambling at noontime. I'm not standing in front of a fridge going, what are we going to do? Because that's exhausting. And it also introduces the room for justifications or choices that aren't aligned with my goals. These are just tiny frameworks for me that make it easier to thrive. Those might not be your frameworks. That might not be your jam. But we do have to have some type of structure in place. Even with my kids, most of you guys know I have 3-year-old twins and a 4-year-old. And they don't really go to school. They each have 2 half days. So they're like 3 or 4 hours, 2 days a week. But that means that most of the mornings we're just waking up and we have the whole day to do what we want to do. And yet even within that, it feels so overwhelming if every day I'm like, what am I doing with these kids? That is overwhelming, and it doesn't have to be that way. We can have a framework, a structure that they feel supported within, and I do too. And it can be the simplest things around routines with getting out of our pajamas and getting our clothes on, routines around when we'd have the TV on and when we don't have the TV on. One of the things that I think is exhausting for a parent, especially if you have younger kids. If you don't have younger kids, less so. But for me, it would be so exhausting if I had to respond constantly to like, can we watch a show? Can we turn on the TV? Can we watch Blippi? Can we do this? My kids know that the TV doesn't go on until after dinner. And so that very basic, small structure eliminates a ton of friction. It's not like, well, so-and-so has a cold, or it's a cold day, or I have a headache. It just keeps it really simple. Like the TV doesn't go on until after dinner, right? The TV doesn't go on until after dinner and until the toys are picked up. Small, but when you start to combine these simple little things that are not restrictive, they're freeing, all of a sudden we don't feel the weight of all of those decisions that don't have to be made each day as though they've never been made before. There are, however, 2 most common mistakes that people make that keep this from being successful. So I want to make sure we talk about them so that you don't make them. One is you make your trellis, your structure, too rigid, and you create standards that rely on perfect conditions. Yeah, don't do that. Spoiler, life is going to be lifey, and rare will there be a day that is perfect conditions. This morning I woke up and we got a lot of snow overnight. So the morning was a little bit different because the kids immediately wanted to put on their snow gear, and we want to support that. Hey, if you want to go outside and play, we're not going to tell you no. But that meant instead of our normal routine, it meant boots and snow pants and hats and gloves and where's your left glove and those boots are on the wrong feet and all that kind of stuff. But my structures still work. My breakfast choices are still the same, right? Everything is still allowed within conditions that are not fixed, that are not perfect. Your structure should be portable. I'm still sticking to my breakfast structure when we're on our ski trip, right? The TV rules are still the TV rules when we're in Maine. Now, here's the other mistake that people make. They expect behavioral shifts that are too big for their current state of life or their current readiness for change. Let me give you an example. Go back to gardening. When we were building out the trellis for our pole beans, it's like little pieces, so you kind of set the rungs. If we had a 2 or 3 foot gap between the rungs for our pole beans, chances are the beans wouldn't be able to make that leap. They'd just collapse because the next rung wasn't accessible enough. And so I see that a lot with people who are like, yeah, I want to drink less, so I'm currently having a drink every day, but I only want to have 1 drink a week. Some of you are going to be ready for that shift. Others of you are going to find that that's too big of a jump. You can't get there from where you are right now with your current readiness for change. Now, here's the deal. You might feel disappointed, like this is too small of a shift to make. It's not going to make a difference. Hey, anything that is an improvement makes a difference. And where we start isn't where we stay, but we'll get nowhere if we just keep setting standards that we won't follow through on, right? I have a client who decided that she recently is going to set a standard of no more than 3 drinks in a night. Now, to some of you might be like, 3 drinks a night, that's a ton. And it's not where she ultimately wants to be. But number 1, it is an improvement. And number 2, it meets her at her willingness and her readiness to change. She doesn't want to stay there. But for now, It's realistic and it's doable and it represents progress. And 2 weeks later, we revisit, hey, are we ready to go to 2? 2 can become 1. 1 can become once a week or once a month. But do not set standards that you are not willing to live by, to include in your day. If you are always saying, well, just this once, not today, I'll start tomorrow, this one thing won't hurt, it's not a big deal, you need to revisit the standard that you set, because that's not a standard, it's an aspiration. So here are some questions if you're trying to decide what this could look like for you. And inside the consistency course, we do this together. That's the power not only of the curriculum in there, but also the weekly check-ins. You ask yourself, does this reduce friction in my day? Does it make things easier? When I have 2 breakfast options and I know that I'm having dinner leftovers for lunch, that reduces friction in my day, makes my day easier. Does it support the version of you want to become? Is it moving you in the right direction? Here's a really key question. Don't skip this one. Is it realistic, even when I'm stressed, tired, or busy? Am I going to do this even when I'm stressed, tired, or busy? Am I ready to commit to this? And does it feel flexible within the structure? Like, even if I'm at my kids' hockey practice, or even if I'm working late, or even if we're traveling, this isn't something I'm going to be giving myself a pass on 3 times a week. If it checks those boxes, great. If it doesn't, let's adjust until it does. Now, one question that I almost always get asked is like, but what about those moments when I just don't want to stick to it? Because those moments are going to happen, and that's real, and that's honest. That's life. Do I still want the French toast? Sure do. Remember episode 3 where we talked about emotional sobriety, how what we want, what we feel, that's real, but it's terrible decision-making criteria? Those feelings are going to show up, but they don't have to be the decision-making criteria. You need some other decision-making criteria. We don't want our framework to collapse just because we're having a feeling, right? So what I want you to do, if that's where you're at, is go back to the emotional sobriety conversation that we had. I think it was in the last episode, or maybe 2 episodes ago, because that's where you need to lean in and do some digging, right? That might be your need more than the trellis right now. But I want you to keep in mind, this is not a restriction thing, it's a supportive thing. You don't need to be stricter more than you need more structure and support, right? This isn't a motivation and a willpower thing. This is about having something in place that is a personal framework that allows you to move more freely through your life, not more restricted, for things to be easier, not harder. Again, if you are somebody who's like, okay, I just need somebody to help me apply this, think about the consistency course, because that's what we do in there. Not only do we have an incredible community, which I think we need more people who have goals and visions that are aligned with the places we're trying to go. We have a full curriculum that helps you apply this. We have a private daily podcast in there. We have live calls every month and weekly check-ins where you're sharing what's going on with you, what's hard, where you need support, what's working, what's not. And then you get direct feedback from me on that. I would love to see you in there. I'll put the link in the show description. And again, if you're enjoying this series, share it, like the podcast, review it, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode.